It's for the success of all of you. And once in a while, the DS would say, everybody on the, or every man for himself, or it was.
The courtroom did not feel like any other room of justice that morning. It felt like a stage, one built not for actors, but for a family that had once lived in the spotlight of millions, now dragged into the raw light of accountability. The walls seemed to close in with every shuffle of shoes, every murmur that passed through the gallery. Wooden pews groaned under the weight of curious onlookers, former friends, distant relatives, and a press corps so large that even the courthouse steps outside buckled under the strain of anticipation. This was no longer about reality TV, no longer about love, faith, or the promises of eternal family. This was about the law and the truth that had always lived in its shadow. The double doors at the rear of the courtroom creaked open, and silence rolled like thunder. Heads turned. Conversations froze mid-breath. A storm was walking in. Kody Brown entered first. His golden brown curls, once flaunted as a symbol of charm and freedom, now seemed wilted, heavy, dragged down by something deeper than age. His eyes darted to the floor as though he feared locking gazes with the public, as though the eyes of strangers might pierce holes through his bravado. Each step was slow, weighted, carrying not only his body but the remnants of a family empire that had collapsed around him. Behind him came Meri, the first wife, the foundation, the woman who had built his story with him when there was no camera, no contract, no audience, just faith and promise. But Meri's eyes were no longer the eyes of a partner. They were distant, hollow, as though she had left long before her body walked through those courtroom doors. She did not touch his shoulder, did not brush against his arm. She walked with him, yes, but she was not with him. Next came Janelle. Practical, steady, the anchor in storms past. But today her strength took on a different form. Clutched tightly to her chest was a folder of papers, thick with numbers, contracts, receipts, the silent evidence of years of financial entanglement and betrayal. That folder was her armor, her shield, her sword. She had always been the one to plan, to budget, to keep order in chaos. Today, she was the one who held the keys to truths that Kody never thought would surface. Christine followed. Her steps were deliberate, steady, but each one echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. Christine had already left him, spiritually, emotionally, publicly. But her presence here was not about reconciliation. It was about truth. She had come to bear witness, to speak for her children, for herself, for all the silent years she swallowed pain behind forced smiles on television screens. Her face did not tremble, though her heart surely thundered. Her resolve was carved in stone. And finally, Robyn, the wife who still legally bore his name, the one he clung to as though she were both salvation and curse. Her hand clutched his arm, not out of devotion, but out of fear. Her eyes darted nervously from face to face, searching desperately for sympathy and finding only condemnation. She pressed herself close to him, as though proximity might shield her from the tidal wave of judgment bearing down. Together, they stood at the defendant's table. But there was no unity here, no shared strength. What the world saw was a fractured family barely disguising its unraveling under the harshest of lights. The judge, an older man with sharp spectacles balanced precariously on his nose, raised his gavel. His face was unmoved, impassive, a man bound not by drama but by law. The gavel struck wood. The sound cracked through the chamber like a gunshot. "All rise," the bailiff commanded. And so it began. The Browns stood together, yet apart, as the judge called the session to order. His voice was calm, almost disinterested, but the words that followed sliced through the stillness. This court convenes today to hear the matter of the state versus Kody Brown and Associates, regarding issues of property, financial responsibility, and alleged violations of state law. It wasn't just about plural marriage anymore. It was about fraud, about lies, about promises broken not only to wives and children, but to the system that governed them all. The prosecutor stood, a woman in a crisp navy blue suit, her hair pulled tightly into a bun, her face set with unshakable poise. She was not here for television. She was not here for the drama that had played out for over a decade in living rooms across America. She was here for justice. "Your Honor," she began, her voice firm but unwavering, "this case is not about religion. It is not about celebrity. It is not even about plural marriage. This case is about accountability. For years, the defendants have operated outside the boundaries of law, cloaking their choices in faith and reality television spectacle. But the evidence will show that behind the cameras, there were betrayals, manipulations, and financial dealings that harmed not only this family, but others who trusted them." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Kody shifted uncomfortably, his lawyer leaning in to murmur something, but his eyes never left the prosecutor. She had stripped the veneer away in her opening words. She wasn't coming for his faith. She was coming for his empire, and for the man who thought he could bend every rule. The defense attorney rose in response, tall, silver-haired, every word polished with years of courtroom battles. "My clients are not criminals," he declared, sweeping a hand toward the Browns. "They are a family. They have raised children, paid their taxes, contributed to their communities. What they ask for is no different than what any American family asks for: the dignity to live freely without persecution. You will hear testimony of love, of sacrifice, of resilience in the face of scrutiny. My clients are not guilty of wrongdoing. They are guilty only of living differently." The courtroom hummed with murmurs. Supporters nodded fiercely. Critics scoffed and whispered. But beneath the legal arguments, the real battle was brewing, not in statutes or clauses, but in the faces of the women seated beside Kody Brown. Meri, silent but brittle, wondered if the decades of sacrifice would finally be recognized or erased. Janelle, her mind racing, feared what financial exposure might mean for her children. Christine, her heart aching, thought of her daughters and sons who had watched their father choose ego over love. And Robyn, her grip tightening, feared most of all that the fortress she had built around her marriage was about to crumble under the weight of truth. The first witness was called. A neighbor, once living next to the Browns during their early years in the public eye. She spoke of disruption, of media vans clogging streets, of gossip tearing through the community like wildfire. The defense countered with stories of kindness, of children well-mannered, of donations and church service. It was a war of perception, a battle of images. Who were the Browns really? Pioneers of freedom, or architects of chaos? Hours bled into the afternoon, the sun casting long golden beams through the high windows. Still, the trial pressed forward. But everyone knew the witnesses who mattered most were not neighbors or outsiders. They were the women, the wives who had lived the story from inside the walls of polygamy. And soon, the prosecutor would call them. The gavel struck again after the recess, echoing through the hushed chamber like a warning. The second day of proceedings was about to begin, and the air carried a heaviness that seemed almost tangible. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters had lined up before dawn to secure their places, their pens poised, eyes glittering with anticipation. The judge, unshaken and impassive, adjusted his glasses. His tone was brisk, clipped. "We will now proceed with witness testimonies." The prosecutor rose to her feet, her navy suit as sharp as her gaze. She scanned the courtroom briefly, then spoke in a voice that sliced through the silence. "The state calls Kody Brown to the stand." Gasps rippled instantly through the chamber. A ripple of shock, excitement, and dread moved like a wave across the benches. Kody, the wife who had left him, the one who had broken from the experiment of love, the one who had dared to choose freedom over the covenant. Kody froze for a single second, her hands gripping the edge of the defendant's table. She felt every eye, every breath aimed at her. In her chest, her heart beat like a war drum. Memories of her children's pleas not to get involved flooded her mind. "Mom, don't do this. Please, it will only make things worse." But Kody had made her choice. Slowly she rose. Her dress swayed faintly as she walked down the narrow aisle toward the witness box. Each step felt like walking against a storm, but her head never bowed. The air itself seemed to tremble as she ascended the steps, was sworn in, and sat down beneath the cold gaze of the judge. The prosecutor stepped closer. "Mrs. Brown, you were spiritually married to the defendant, Kody Brown, for over 2 decades. Is that correct?" "Yes," Christine replied, her voice steady, though her throat ached. "And during that time, you were a part of a plural marriage arrangement?" "Yes." The prosecutor nodded slowly. Then, after a pause that made the silence ache, she asked, "Can you tell the court what that was like?" Christine's breath caught. Her eyes flicked toward Kody, who sat rigid at the defense table, his eyes burning into her, silently begging. She saw the pleading in his gaze, the unspoken warning. "Don't you dare." But Christine turned away. Originally, she began softly, it was about love. About family. "We thought we were building something holy. Something bigger than ourselves." She paused, the memories flashing in her mind. Children's laughter echoing in shared yards, late-night conversations about faith and destiny, potlucks and prayers. But as time went on, it became painful. There were jealousies, rivalries, neglect. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "We tried to keep it hidden from the cameras, to pretend we were whole. But behind closed doors, we were shattering." Gasps echoed from the gallery. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Robyn's hand clutched Kody's arm so tightly her knuckles whitened. Meri dropped her gaze, her face pale, lips pressed thin. Janelle's grip tightened on her folder until her hands trembled. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the moment. "Mrs. Brown," she pressed, "did the defendant ever prioritize his religious beliefs over the welfare of his family?" The question hung heavy, like a noose in the room. Christine froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could feel Kody's eyes burning into her soul. She could almost hear him whispering, "Stay silent. Protect me. Protect us." Her lips parted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Yes." Many times. The courtroom exploded with murmurs. Gasps, sharp intakes of breath, shocked whispers. Kody's lawyer sprang to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. That is personal opinion and speculation." The judge raised his gavel. "Sustained. The last statement will be stricken from the record." But it was too late. The words had landed, and no gavel could erase them. They clung to the air, heavy, undeniable, echoing in every ear. The prosecutor leaned in, her tone quieter now, gentler. "Christine, can you explain to the court why you left?" Christine's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She shut her eyes, summoning every ounce of courage, then opened them again, clear, determined. "Because I couldn't keep playing this game. I couldn't let my children think that love meant giving yourself away until nothing was left. I couldn't let them believe that their mother's silence was strength. I wanted them to know love can be equal. Love can be whole." Her words cracked like glass shattering. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to look away. Across the courtroom, Kody's face twisted with rage. His hands slammed flat against the defense table, his jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. Robyn leaned toward him, whispering frantically, tears spilling down her face. Meri's shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Janelle, ever composed, closed her eyes briefly as if whispering a prayer. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. The defense attorney rose, smoothing his tie. He paced slowly before Christine, his voice calm, calculated. "Mrs. Brown, is it not true that you entered this marriage voluntarily?" "Yes," Christine admitted. "And is it not true that you knew precisely what plural marriage entailed?" Christine lifted her chin. "Yes. But knowing what you're getting into doesn't mean you have to endure it for the rest of your life." Her voice quivered on the last word, but her stare was unflinching. The defense attorney hesitated, just for a moment, caught off guard by the steel in her tone. Then he nodded curtly. No further questions. Christine rose from the stand, her steps slow but strong. The room buzzed with whispers, the atmosphere electric as though a storm had passed through and left the air crackling. She returned to her seat, her body trembling, but her spirit unbroken. For Kody, the blow had landed deep. His first wife to testify had not just pulled back the curtain, she had torn it down completely. And the storm was only beginning. The prosecutor rose again. The state calls Janelle Brown to the stand. The courtroom fell silent once more. The air in the chamber seemed to shift as Christine stepped down, her testimony still vibrating in the silence she left behind. The gallery buzzed with whispers, but the bailiff's sharp command for order settled the room. Then, the prosecutor rose again, her voice smooth, deliberate. The state calls Janelle Brown to the stand. Every head turned. Janelle moved slowly, her folder clutched in her hands, her gaze steady and unreadable. Unlike Christine, she did not tremble. Unlike Meri, she did not bow her head. Unlike Robyn, she did not cry. Janelle was the woman of numbers, the one who had held the family's books, the one who had kept order when chaos swirled around them. She had been the quiet backbone. And now, she would be the reckoning. As she was sworn in and seated, Kody's jaw tightened. His hands drummed nervously against the table, betraying a flicker of panic. He knew exactly what Janelle carried in those folders. He had underestimated Christine's fire, but Janelle? Janelle brought receipts. The prosecutor stepped forward. Mrs. Brown, you were spiritually married to the defendant for nearly 3 decades. During that time, what role did you play in the family's financial matters? Janelle's voice was calm, firm. I managed most of it. I kept the budgets, tracked expenses, managed the bank accounts. I was the one who made sure the bills got paid when others didn't want to deal with it. I was, for all intents and purposes, the financial manager of the Brown family. The prosecutor nodded. And were you compensated for this work?
No.
Janelle's voice was flat, sharp. It was expected of me. Kody told me once that keeping the family afloat was simply my contribution, my calling. So I did it. Whispers rippled across the gallery. The prosecutor leaned in slightly. Mrs. Brown, are you saying the defendant assigned financial responsibility to you, but retained final control? Janelle shifted in her seat.
Yes.
I could manage day-to-day, but when it came to big decisions, property purchases, investments, signing loans, he always had the last word. And when Robyn entered the family, suddenly all decisions went through her. I stopped being part of the conversations. I just paid the bills. The courtroom murmured again, louder this time. Kody clenched his fists beneath the table, his knuckles pale. Robyn whispered frantically in his ear, but he refused to look at her. The prosecutor's tone sharpened. Mrs. Brown, can you explain to the court what happened with the Coyote Pass property? The room stilled. Cameras clicked. Every reporter leaned forward. Janelle exhaled slowly, then opened her folder. She slid a page forward, her finger tapping a date highlighted in yellow. In 2018, we purchased property in Flagstaff, Arizona. It was supposed to be divided evenly among the wives. Kody promised it was our legacy, our future. But when I reviewed the deeds, I noticed discrepancies. Parcels that were meant to be in my name were filed under his. Others were shifted into Robyn's. Some of the loans were secured using our joint accounts, but the paperwork was signed only by Kody. A gasp cut through the courtroom. The prosecutor raised her eyebrows. Are you saying the defendant moved property and loans without your consent?
Yes.
Janelle's voice did not waver. And when I questioned him, he told me it was for the good of the family. But when I asked for documentation for transparency, he said I didn't need to understand, that he had it under control. What I later discovered was that Robyn's house, her $900,000 home, had been prioritized, while the rest of us were left renting or, in some cases, homeless. Reporters scribbled furiously. Shock rolled through the gallery like thunder. Christine closed her eyes, pain flickering across her face. Meri's hands folded tighter in her lap, her jaw trembling. Robyn shifted, her face red, eyes darting between Kody and the crowd. The prosecutor's tone grew heavier. Mrs. Brown, do you have evidence of these discrepancies? Janelle slid forward more documents.
Yes.
Bank statements, title transfers, mortgage paperwork, all signed by Kody. None signed by me, Christine, or Meri. The silence was deafening. The prosecutor stepped back, letting the papers speak for themselves. Finally, she asked, "Why are you here today, Mrs. Brown? Why testify against your husband?" Janelle's breath hitched, but her face did not break. Her voice, however, carried the weight of decades. Because truth matters. For years, I tried to convince myself that silence was keeping the peace. But silence only protected Kody, not the family. My children watched me shrink into nothing. They watched him dismiss me. They watched money meant for their futures disappear into houses that weren't theirs. I am here because my silence cost too much already. I won't let it cost my children their dignity, too. Her words struck like a hammer. Kody's face flushed red, then pale. His lips moved as though he wanted to object, to lash out, but no words came. His chest heaved, his breath ragged. Robyn's tears streaked silently down her face as she clung to his sleeve, but even her grip could not anchor him. The prosecutor nodded. No further questions. The defense attorney rose, his face pale, his movements stiff. He walked toward Janelle with deliberate calm. "Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you agreed, for years, to this arrangement? That you willingly handled finances and benefited from the lifestyle the family built?" Janelle's gaze cut into him. "Yes, I agreed, because I believed Kody when he said we were in this together. I believed it was for the family. But what I didn't agree to was deception. I didn't agree to being erased from the decisions. I didn't agree to sacrificing my future, so someone else could live in comfort while my kids slept on air mattresses." The defense attorney faltered, his throat dry. He shuffled his notes, his confidence slipping. Finally, he muttered, "No further questions." Janelle closed her folder, rose, and stepped down. Her back was straight, her steps firm. She did not look at Kody as she passed him. But Kody looked at her, his eyes wide, his face hollow. For the first time, it seemed, he realized the fortress he thought would protect him was crumbling from within. The prosecutor rose, once more. Her voice was cool, steady. "The state calls Meri Brown to the stand." The room gasped again. The gallery was restless, buzzing like a hive of anticipation. Christine's fire had burned through the courtroom. Janelle's documents had cut like sharpened steel, but what came next felt different. Heavier. The prosecutor's voice was steady, almost reverent, as she spoke. "The state calls Meri Brown to the stand." A silence fell over the chamber, so thick it was suffocating. Meri sat motionless at first, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were lowered, fixed on some invisible point, as if the floor itself was holding her hostage. Her body seemed smaller than it was, her shoulders rounded, her breathing shallow. For years, Meri had been the quiet one, the loyal one, the wife who stayed even when love had fled, who swallowed humiliation in silence, who let the world think she was simply difficult or jealous, while the truth cut her to the bone. Now, all eyes waited for her. Slowly, Meri rose. Her steps were tentative, as though her body doubted her choice even as her spirit pushed her forward. She ascended the witness stand like a woman walking to the edge of a cliff. When the bailiff swore her in, her voice was almost too soft to hear. But when she finally sat, her silence was louder than any scream. The prosecutor approached carefully. "Mrs. Brown, you were the first wife of the defendant. Married in 1990, correct?" "Yes." Meri's voice was soft, but it carried. "You were legally married to him for over 2 decades, and spiritually for even longer?" "Yes." The prosecutor paused, glancing at the jury. "Can you tell us what those years were like?" Meri's throat bobbed. Her hands twisted in her lap. For a long moment, it seemed she wouldn't answer. Then she lifted her eyes, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to be seen. "They were lonely," she whispered. The word cracked through the silence like lightning. From the outside, it looked like family, unity,
Love.
but from the inside, I was alone. From the beginning, I was asked to sacrifice my time, my voice, my needs, for the sake of harmony. I was told that jealousy was a sin, that silence was noble. And I believed it. For decades, I believed that if I stayed, if I endured, I would be rewarded with love. Her voice trembled, her eyes glassy. But the truth was, love had conditions. His love always came with a price. If I obeyed, if I bent, if I smiled through the pain, then maybe. But if I questioned him, if I asked for more, then I was punished with silence, with distance, with shame. Whispers swept across the gallery. Robyn pressed her trembling hands to her mouth. Christine bowed her head, tears slipping free. Janelle closed her eyes, her lips parting in a silent prayer. The prosecutor's tone softened. Mrs. Brown, can you give us an example? Meri's lips parted, her breath ragged. She hesitated, then spoke words she had carried for years. In 2015, when my heart was breaking, I reached for something outside of the marriage. Everyone knows it now. The catfishing scandal. What people don't know is it wasn't about betrayal. It was about survival. I was starving. I was drowning in silence. And when Kody found out, instead of asking why, instead of seeing me, he abandoned me emotionally forever. He told me he no longer wanted me. But he kept me there, on the fringe of the family, so the picture wouldn't look broken. Gasps shot through the courtroom. Kody slammed his hands on the table, his voice booming. That's not true. The judge's gavel cracked down. Order. But Meri didn't flinch. For the first time, she looked directly at Kody. Her eyes burned with tears, but her voice was steady. You told me I had no worth to you as a wife. You told me to stay in the corner and pretend for the cameras. You told me, her voice cracked, that I was the sacrifice this family needed to make so the others could be happy. And I believed you. I let you erase me, because I thought maybe my silence would buy my family peace. But all it bought was my own destruction. The room was frozen. No one moved, no one breathed. Robyn sobbed openly now, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Janelle pressed a tissue to her eyes. Christine clutched her chest, as though the weight of Meri's words pierced her too. The prosecutor spoke again, her tone low. Mrs. Brown, why testify now? Why break your silence after all these years? Meri's gaze drifted to the jury, then to the gallery, where her children sat. Her voice broke, but she pushed through. Because silence is how he won. Silence is how I lost myself. And if I keep silent now, then he still owns me. He still owns the narrative, the truth, the story of who I was. But no more. I am here because I want my daughter to know that her mother finally spoke. That her mother chose truth, even if it's too late for love. Her tears fell freely now, her body trembling, but her spirit glowed with something fierce, something long buried but finally free. The prosecutor swallowed hard, then nodded. No further questions. The defense attorney rose, clearly shaken. He stepped closer, his tone hesitant. Mrs. Brown, you admit you were unfaithful to the marriage. Doesn't that undermine your credibility here today? Meri's head turned sharply, her eyes fierce. I was unfaithful to a man who had already abandoned me. I sought comfort because my husband chose another wife over me, chose silence over love. If that makes me guilty, then I accept it. But it doesn't erase the years he erased me. And it doesn't erase the truth. The attorney's face paled. He stammered, then lowered his papers. No further questions. Meri stood slowly, her legs trembling, but her head high. She stepped down from the stand, tears glistening on her cheeks. The gallery did not cheer, but the silence itself was deafening, reverent, heavy, almost holy. Kody sat slumped at the table, his face ghostly pale. His empire of control was crumbling, not from outside attacks, but from within. From the women who once loved him most. The prosecutor rose once more. Her voice was sharp, commanding. The state calls Robyn Brown to the stand. The room gasped as one. And for the first time, Robyn's tears froze on her cheeks.